Hello guys, welcome to GizzyFix. Thank you very much for joining us today. So I was very lucky in a recent find on Gumtree. I managed to snag two Amiga 500s, a 1084 monitor, loads of games, loads of accessories for about £70. So yeah, really good good deal on this. I was really happy. Always wanted Amiga ever since I had an Amiga 1200. Since I was younger, but I just never sort of got around to getting one really, so I thought this is absolutely brilliant, especially at a time when I'm sort of, getting into modding. And only downside is some of these are in pretty bad state. Yes, sorry, that was a bad joke, but as you can see that a lot of them are covered in mould, a lot of rust, a lot of things like that, but there's even documents as well, so there's a lot of Amiga programming manuals and things. Not that I think I could do that, because essentially it looks incredibly complicated, but I think as we start to dig into the console, I've got to really see. So I've got two. I'm only going to really show one, so it's a little bit of a shorter video this week. I'm working on other things as well, so I've got to try and space out my time. But yeah, I'm stripping one down so we can really have a bit of a look and see what we're dealing with. Oh dear. Yeah, better get that white vinegar ready, I reckon. But yeah, definitely lots and lots of white vinegar. So I'm going to give that a go. I've heard that can bring up, the metal fairly well. And so we're going to give that a try as well a little bit later. You can see both the LEDs here are cracked. So something's landed on this in such a way, or it's just buckled under the weight. Because the LEDs actually, essentially it's just two plastics, and then there's two LEDs to light up. So one side is cracked. But we'll take a little look at those later as I sort of strip down. As you can see, yeah, I did get a really good deal, but they'd just not been looked after. They'd just been kind of abandoned. And I would hazard a guess, has this been kept in a shed? Or some sort of outhouse. Not an outhouse, that's the wrong term. But sort of an outdoor-ish area that's going to allow this sort of, damp to occur. So I am well aware that, there could be components and things that are not going to work. So I'm really just a solid visual inspection. If there's anything I've learned, it really is just give it a good solid visual inspection. I'm starting a test now, and do you know what? It actually turns on. I didn't get any footage of it because I'm an idiot, and this is some of the first stuff that I shot really for the channel, but this is probably one of the worst ones. So that's it's the RF modulator. So this plugs into the RGB because the Amiga has RGB. And also the capacitors, just as an example, one of the power supplies, and these pretty hefty capacitors is completely, blown out and just degraded, so I need to replace that. The other ones don't look too bad. But looking at the monitor now, it's a shame because the monitor did work, and then one of the cathodes, you have to forgive me, I don't really understand how, CRT TVs work. I know they have different cathode rays, and I think each one maybe handles a different colour. Shortly after I turned it on, it just went pink. So as far as I can understand, I think that means the green cathode, or the green whatever's responsible for doing, the green colouring of the TV, has essentially failed, which leaves just the red and the blue, and I think that's why it's got a green tint. I mean, my colours are sort of, it might not be as it is, but you can understand that all the colours need to mix together to give you a clear image. I'm missing one, so that's why I'm getting a pink screen. So yeah, which is not great. And I do actually dig into why this is working, and the switch itself. So let's talk about the switch. Essentially, it should push in and hold. It doesn't. So somewhere inside this switch, it just bounces back out, which is not great. There is a way apparently to open these and then, reattach the parts that need to, because it's kind of like a one-way little system in there. It's just slipped off. I tried to find these, and these are actually quite expensive. So, and again, they were different sizes, and I would have to sort of augment it. It weren't worth it, for someone who's just learning. I didn't want to cause any more damage. But lucky me, it does even come with sort of like a design schematic, which is mad. Because after a while, I was looking at this for a while, and I was wondering what it was. And it wasn't until I actually opened the monitor up and I started recognising some of the names for the chips and the ICs that are there. So as you can see, it's 2595, and I was like, that's the same. So I had a fairly good guide of being able to trace through and see if resistors had the right resistance and things, and certain diodes, but it was just to go from like 0 to hero really in terms of, you know, complexity, and I just really couldn't keep up with it, to be honest. I followed it as best I could. I couldn't find any shorts, but what I did see was a fairly, you know, a lot of corrosion and degrading. So I thought something, obviously, you know, something's not kicking in. I can't see anything that's obvious that has failed, but what I can see is certain joints have gone cold. So they are, as you can see them there, they have gone cold. So I did touch them up. I cleaned it all, and it just, yeah, it didn't work. That was my image of the screen. So I was like, well, I really tried on that, and I admitted defeat. Something with a bit more manual was the actual case to the Amiga as well, that sits on top of the keyboard. This is the other Amiga that I had. Essentially, it just completely snapped off, and I was like, I want to leave it better than when I found it. So I was like, can I actually reattach it and fill in the gaps? I mean, you know, they sold fairly well, so there was loads of these there, you know, out there. But I didn't want to just throw it in the trash. You know, I wanted to at least leave it in a better state. That's all I wanted to do. So a lot of epoxy, and even the plastic epoxy that you sort of can mix together and it turns into like a clay, that actually worked quite well. So looking at the metal itself, I did, you know, want to try the white vinegar and just let it soak as much as possible. See if I can get some of that corrosion off of the metal as well, because as you can see, it is really quite bad, and it shows that it must have been stored in some sort of outdoor area or something. So this stuff is pretty pungent, so I was actually doing it outside in like an outdoor store, but this is just the metal that I'm storing outdoors, so I'm giving myself a break there. And after a while, we do start to see some, I think, what you would call oxidation, which I think is the white vinegar actually doing what it's supposed to do and getting rid of the rust. But you just got to leave it for such a long time, and I think this rust was so strong that it really, you know, wasn't having a massive effect. And I did in the end actually end up just scrubbing it as best I can with some Scotch Brite, because really I just wanted to get it off as best as possible. And, you know, even the screws as well, I wanted to sort of bring up and just leave it in a better state than when I found it. You know, it's such a shame that such a great, you know, console, it's not really a console, but a personal computer that was heavily influenced, you know, British gaming and things like that for the time, you know, such a shame. But looking at the power supply, one of the power supplies worked fine. I checked it, it looked fine. And to be honest, I don't like messing around with power supplies because these are mega dangerous. I was an electrician, so I understand and I respect electricity, and these are things you don't mess around with. But essentially, it really was just a capacitor blown out, and I checked all the others and I couldn't see any others leaking or anything like that, so I was like, great, I'll just get exactly the same rated one and stick it in. It was a nice, sort of easy, obvious fix, really. So yeah, popped it back in, cleaned it up, and checked everything else, couldn't see nothing else at all. It was just it was actually really nice to work on something quite large. A lot of the stuff I've worked on lately has been quite small in terms of the electronics and that. So obviously going back in time, things were just bigger. So it was actually really nice to not have to use like a microscope or anything and make sure that I could see everything. And the capacitor just, yeah, it was no dramas at all getting that in. It was almost therapeutic doing this one, and I was fairly confident I could get this one working. And that was kind of the whole point. It wasn't really for the channel that I want to like do this, although recording it is quite, you know, it's quite cool anyways, and I can look back on it and say, oh, that was quite smart that I did. But there was just an idea that I'm leaving things in a better state than when I found them. You know, I can't repair this back to its former glory. You know, I don't have that skill set, but as long as I can just leave it better, and it worked. You know, yeah, so I did. It's in a better state. Hooking it up to the other TV that I use for testing, the board actually works, which is fantastic. But there are a few things I need to fix, and these LEDs is one of them. My idea was to, you know, they light up. So could I just place an LED kind of sat down behind where the plastic would lay, and just sort of sunk sort of to the left a little bit? So as you can see, as I demonstrate and I make a connection, it does actually work. It turns on. So the LED is working. The LED circuit, the resistors are the right rating. So my idea was just to plonk new ones in. I couldn't remove that plastic because it would look odd. But essentially, you're not going to see that. But the LED will illuminate underneath the plastic sort of cutout on the top of the Amiga's, you know, faceplate, and then shine through. The only downside was that it's actually too bright, because obviously they're more modern, your technology is advanced, of course it has. So when I lit it up, I was like, my God, it's like a lightsaber. But it works, you know, and you can clearly distinguish the colours, to say the least. So just looking back to the faceplate of the Amiga now, just for a second, it doesn't look too bad considering it was completely broken off. So essentially used that plastic epoxy and just used a Dremel just to file it down, and I actually moulded that by hand just to create a corner, you know, because it was snapped off. There's no other real way I can do it, you know, and again it looked better just being complete and together than just being like snapped and broken. So that was my rationale between doing it, really, essentially. And looking at the metal, after I think it was about 3 days I left this with the, you know, the white vinegar, and it weren't bad. I did have to, you know, Scotch Brite it. Essentially it's like a scouring just to get some of it off, because it was so utterly sort of, you know, on there, for want of a better term. I did have to just scour it off, but it's better than rust. I got all the rust off, but it is kind of essentially, you know, massively impaired, which is a shame, but you're not going to see it. It is just shielding. So I think it's time now to really put them both back together. I wanted to make at least one good version out of the two, and then the other one can go to someone who's much better skilled and probably, you know, really knows what they're doing. I have always wanted an Amiga. It's definitely an itch I've always wanted to scratch, and I've got the Amiga A500 Mini, but there's definitely something about having the original hardware, you know, in ownership, and you can sort of appreciate it for when it was made and the time of when it was made and what was achieved using it. You know, there's definitely a lot to be said for that. So I wanted to create at least the best version that I could, and I heard about drive emulators for the Amiga, the GoTech drive emulators. They have a lot of uses and things, because the drive that actually came with it is completely knackered, and yeah, I could not, no matter what I did, sometimes it would work. So I bought a GoTech, and I should have gone, you know, on AliExpress, because they're actually on there a lot cheaper, and the software is completely open source, so it's completely free. And look at those lights, the LEDs look good, don't they? So yeah, I was looking at the GoTech, and it works really well. The only trouble was the A500 is told to boot from the internal drive. Now the cables weren't big enough, and I got the wrong type of GoTech to be able to sit inside, or at least I couldn't figure it out. So the cables weren't long enough, so essentially what I had to do was just extend them and sort of use a longer IDE cable and a longer power cable and kind of extend them out and sit it on top. I don't mind, because I'm the only one using it, but I could not get the operating system to boot using the external drive outlet at the back of the you know, the computer, which is a shame. But yeah, and for some reason the RAM expansion, it just did not like it. So there's probably an issue with that. I couldn't find it. I cleaned everything up and sort of, you know, placed it away for another day maybe. But yeah, it really didn't like that, which is a shame. So there we have it, guys. A nice, easy, quick video this week. Sorry, hopefully I have something a little bit better next week. Yeah, it was a good experience on this one. Put it back as best I can. The other Amiga is actually in a lot better state than this one, but this is kind of the worst of the two. But not bad, I don't think. Not too bad. But thank you so much for watching. You've made it this far. Wish you all well, and who knows, maybe I'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.